The nationalist movement. Nationalism is a sense of oneness born out of sharing the same geographical territory, the same history and culture, and same aspiration to be independent of foreign domination. In India, this feeling arose among the people after the revolt of 1857, when people from different walks of life belonging to different regions rose against one common enemy. The second half of 19th century saw the growth of national political conscience in India. There were many factors that united Indians against foreign rule. The British ruled India administratively and politically by getting the country under their centralized control. Uniform laws were applied to everyone without any discrimination. Apart from uniform legal system, the postal system, common currency, railway and telegraph systems helped people to link with different parts of the country, thus bringing people closer to each other. Scholars and writers, through their writings and discoveries, made Indians proud of their glorious past. Some of the reformers inspired the Indians not only to discard outmoded customs and practices, but also to question the British authority. They also roused patriotic sentiments among the people. The press and the growth of nationalist literature spread modern ideas of nationalism, democracy, socialism, and internationalism. Besides this, the introduction of English language acted as a link between Indians from different regions of the country. Knowing this language helped Indians to communicate with each other. Britain was the emerging industrial giant in the 19th century, and the educated Indians thought that this progress would be reflected in India as well. The process of disillusionment started when the Indian intellectuals noticed that in all spheres the country was regressing. The start of deindustrialization, a gradual decline of Indian handicrafts and interest of British in opening new industries was significant enough to anger and frustrate Indian expectations. India was turned into a mere supplier of raw materials and a market for British manufactured goods. Thus, India was becoming poorer day by day. During the British rule, Indians were often ill-treated. They could not aspire to higher posts in administration. They were not allowed to travel in the same compartments of train with the British. Lord Lytton passed the Arms Act, which prohibited Indians from possessing arms without licenses. No such restriction was imposed on Europeans living in India. Moreover, Vernacular Press Act was passed, which restricted the newspaper published in vernacular languages in India. The recruitment age of Indians was reduced in Indian civil services. The introduction of Ilbert Bill meant that Indian judges could try people of the British nationality, unlike the earlier times when Indian magistrates could not judge cases involving British. Lord Ripon wanted to end unjust practices, but the British living in India protested against this bill. Ultimately, Ripon was forced to partially yield to their demands. According to a new rule, Europeans tried in a district magistrates' court could ask for a jury at least half of which could consist of Europeans. Lord Ripon was called back to England. The reaction of the British showed their attitude as one of racial superiority. Trivia: the Indian National Congress was formed by Britisher named A.O. Hume in 1885. Many Indian newspapers created awareness among the people about the anti-national policies of the British and spread the message of patriotism and national consciousness. They helped to form public opinion in India. Writing of some Indian as well as British scholars led to the rediscovery of India's glorious past, which helped to create a feeling of pride and respect for their own past. The birth of Indian National Congress. Before the establishment of Indian National Congress in 1885, there were quite a few associations which had been set up to promote the interests of Indians. Some of these associations were British Indian Association, Madras Native Association, Bombay Presidency Association, Pune Sarvajanik Sabha, etc. However, these associations were limited both in membership, programs and targets. Their memberships were limited to upper-class educated Indians. They were also localized. A need was felt for an all-India organization which would ideally involve the masses and would be more assertive in putting forward the demands of the people of India. Keeping this in mind, S.N. Banerjee started the All India National Conference at Calcutta in 1883. A second national conference was held in 1885. Same year, that is, in 1885, A.O. Hume, a retired British civil servant, along with some important Indian leaders, set up a political party, Indian National Congress. Their first meeting was held in Bombay, Mumbai, under Vomesh Chandra Banerjee. 72 delegates from all over the country attended the Congress. Since the All India National Conference and Indian National Congress upheld the same aim, it was decided to amalgamate the two into one single body, absorbing the conference into the Congress. The British felt that there should be an organization through which the Indians would be able to air their grievances. Under British supervision, this would act like a safety valve. This would enable the British to know the demands of the Indian people, and thus they would act accordingly. With this, they would be able to avoid a repeat of the revolt of 1857. The moderate phase, 1885 to 1905. In the early stages, the main aim of Congress was to promote friendly relations between nationalist political workers from different parts of the country. During this period, the Congress was led by a group of people called moderates. The moderates did not want independence from the British rule. Their main objective was to secure more representation for the Indians in the government. Prominent leaders of this time were Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Dadabhai Naoroji, Firoz Shah Mehta, S.N. Banerjee, M.G. Ranade, etc. The main demands of the Congress at this time were to secure more representation in administration, cutting down on expenditure in military matters and on administration, to try and stop the drain of wealth from India, taxes in general and land revenue in particular to be cut down, to bring about changes in economic policies so as to free the farmers from the clutches of moneylenders, to increase the number of members in legislative councils and to give them more powers, to hold civil service examinations in India so that Indians had a better chance of clearing them. The methods used by moderates to get their aims achieved were the press, persuasion, petition, and prayers, etc. They did not wish to antagonize the British government, believing that in due course of time, the British would see the justness of Indian demands and Indians would have the same rights as enjoyed by the British. Trivia: during the nationalist movement, some famous leaders turned journalists used the press to propagate their ideas. Some of them were Dadabhai Naoroji, who ran Rasti Guftar, Kesari and Maratha, edited by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Hindustan by Madan Mohan Malviya, Punjabi, Bande Mataram, The People by Lala Lajpat Rai. By the beginning of 20th century, a new group called radicals or militant nationalists emerged. They agitated for greater political consciousness by resorting to a radical way of political agitation and were even prepared to make all sacrifices for their country. At times, these radical leaders used extremist methods and encouraged the people to become bold, brave, and patriotic. They demanded Swaraj or freedom from the British rule. The important leaders of militant nationalist group were Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandra Pal. They felt that Britishers would not listen to the appeals of the Indians. The Indians will have to boldly fight for their rights. Tilak declared, "Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it." Thus, Congress became a bigger platform for voicing the grievances of the people. Partition of Bengal. Many of the policies of Viceroy Curzon went against the interest of Indians and angered the extremists. Bengal was an important centre of nationalist movement and was, at that time, a very large presidency comprising Bihar and parts of Assam and Odisha. Curzon partitioned Bengal in 1905 on the pretext of administrative convenience. However, instead of separating the non-Bengali areas of Bihar and Odisha from the province, a proposal was made to separate only eastern part of Bengal from the province. The reason behind the proposal was to weaken the nationalist movement, which was very strong in Bengal. This attempt to destroy the unity of Bengalis sparked off an anti-partition movement. The movement was marked by fasts, processions, and the singing of Vande Mataram. Protesters tied Rakhi to demonstrate brotherhood. The anti-partition movement spread to some other parts of India. Under the Governor-Generalship of Lord Curzon, Partition of Bengal came in effect on 16 October 1905. Protest movements were launched by both moderates and radicals, but eventually the radicals were able to gather greater support and momentum, which saw their emergence as leaders in this phase of nationalist movement. Trivia: some revolutionaries helped in Indian nationalist movement from abroad. The parties formed were Indian House by Shyama Krishna Varma, India House by Shyama Krishna Varma, Gadar Party, Berlin Committee established by Virendra Nath Chattopadhyay. Reasons for the emergence of radicals. Moderates did not achieve anything substantial, and it disillusioned people who were now looking for rapid political actions. The trio of Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Bipin Chandra Pal emphasized on the strength of the people being a major weapon and instilled a sense of patriotism among the people. There were increasing frustrations among the educated Indians regarding the British policies and the protest measures taken by the moderates against them. Indian National Congress came to be dominated by radicals after the Partition of Bengal. The partition, instead of breaking up the momentum of the national movement, ironically accelerated it. People from various strata of life came together to fight against the Partition of Bengal, Swadeshi and boycott movement. The partition also angered the moderate leadership of Congress. The leaders now launched the Swadeshi and boycott movement. Swadeshi means of one's own country, and it encouraged Indian industries. The people began to boycott British goods. Heaps of foreign goods were burnt in public places. Shops selling foreign goods were picketed. The new radical leadership of Congress played a major role in the Swadeshi movement. The middle-class urbanites, including women, actively participated in it, and radicals emerged powerful after this movement. Trivia: the famous words of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, "Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it," were uttered in a court hearing. Revolutionaries. Revolutionaries were the group of people who believed in the violent means to achieve independence. They were frustrated with the slow progress of the movement towards self-rule. They wanted to physically expel British from India by organizing assassination of unpopular British officials. They also committed dacoities to collect money and looted arms to achieve their aim. Early in the 20th century, there began efforts to form revolutionary groups in India. Many secret societies of revolutionary youth came into existence. The most famous among them was an Anushilan Samiti along with Yugantar and Abhinav Bharat. They initiated physical and moral training of their members. In April 1908, Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Chaki threw a bomb at a carriage which they believed was occupied by Kingsford, the unpopular British judge. Later, Khudiram Bose was hanged while Prafulla Chaki gunned himself. Revolutionaries even threw a bomb at the Viceroy Lord Hardinge while he was riding on an elephant. He was wounded. The phase also saw the spread of revolutionary activities in abroad. Indian revolutionaries in USA and Canada established a Gadar Party. It became the center of revolutionary activities outside India. V.D. Savarkar, Madam Bhikaji Kama, Lala Hardayal and Madan Lal Dhingra were prominent leaders of the revolutionaries. Birth of the Muslim League. The Muslim League was founded in 1906 under the leadership of Salimullah Khan and Aga Khan, the Nawab of Dhaka. The League grew due to the encouragement given by the British to the Muslims, so that Muslims could be won over, keeping in line with their policy of divide and rule. Another reason was the perception of some Muslim leaders that the Hindus were in majority would leave the Muslims out in the future governance of India. The League supported the Partition of Bengal and demanded special reservation for the Muslims in the government service. It consisted of mostly the upper-class Muslims, and its primary motive was to put a stop to the young Muslims from going over to Congress and thereby into the nationalist fold. The Muslim League, being a purely loyalist body, looked up to the government for favour and patronage. In the process, the British propaganda of dividing Bengal would help the Muslims led to the rise of communal violence and contributed to the rise of separatist tendencies. Surat Split. Presiding over the Congress session of 1906, Dadabhai Naoroji accepted Swaraj as the goal of Congress. The moderates had serious differences with the radicals. Unlike the radicals, they did not accept Swadeshi and boycott as regular methods of agitation. Nor did they want these methods to be applied outside Bengal. The moderates and radicals parted ways at the Surat session of Congress. The British used this display of disunity to their advantage. They followed a two-pronged policy of appeasing the moderates by giving them concessions and deterring the radicals through repressive measures. Morley Minto reforms. The British tried to placate the moderates by passing the Indian Councils Act of 1909, also known as Morley Minto reforms. The Act increased the number of elected members in the Imperial Legislative Council so that they were at par with the English. The number of members in the provincial councils were also increased. The Act also introduced separate electorates for the Muslims, which meant that there would be separate constituencies for the Hindus and Muslims. The Hindus could vote for only Hindu candidates. This was done in the name of protecting the Muslim minority. But in reality, this was a part of the British policy of divide and rule. Through this act, the British hoped to keep away the Muslims from the national movement, as it encouraged the communal divide between Hindus and Muslims. The moderates soon realized that the act did not provide adequate representation to the Indians in the legislature. Trivia. The Congress and the Muslim League came together for the first time in 1916 session of the Congress at Lucknow. National movement during World War I. Two important declarations were made in Delhi Darbar held in 1911 when King George V and Queen Mary visited India. The first was that the capital of British India would be shifted from Calcutta to Delhi, and the other was the revoking of the Partition of Bengal. During the First World War, 1914 to 1918, the Congress cooperated with the British war efforts. Huge number of Indian soldiers were sent overseas to fight for the British. This caused widespread economic distress because of severe scarcity of goods and a steep rise in prices. Some Indian businessmen and industrialists made huge profits through trading in war supplies. In 1915 to 1916, Tilak and Annie Besant organized the Home Rule League. The Home Rule League wanted self-government in India after the World War. Annie Besant was arrested but was soon released due to public agitation condemning her arrest. The nationalists now fully realized that the British government was fully taking advantage of the disunity among them. The Lucknow session of Indian National Congress in 1916 was historic on two accounts. 1. The moderates and radicals decided to come together and put up a united front. 2. The Congress and Muslim League sank their differences and fought against the government on a common platform, presenting common political demands before the government. Lokmanya Tilak played an important role in bringing the two groups together. The unity between moderates and radicals on one hand and the Congress and the Muslim League on the other gave an added impetus to our national movement. Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms, 1919. To pacify the nationalists after the First World War, the government announced the Government of India Act of 1919, also known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. The main provisions of this act were: 1. The Legislative Council at the centre was made bicameral, having two houses, the Legislative Assembly and the Council of State. The majority of the members were now elected. However, the right to vote was not universal. It was given only to those who possessed property. 2. A system of government called diarchy was introduced in the provinces. The subjects of the provincial government were divided into two parts: the reserved and the transferred. Important subjects like finance and law and order were reserved subjects in the hands of the governor, which he addressed with the help of the council, whereas the transferred subjects like health and education were administered with the help of members from the legislature who were Indians, but their views and opinions could be overruled. The real subjects were the more important ones, and hence the real powers were still in the hands of the British and not with the Indians. The act fell much below the expectations of the people. The Indians were not at all satisfied, and their disillusionment led to the protest movements all over the country. To control the growing restlessness, the British passed the Rowlatt Act in 1919. The act authorized the government to imprison any person without any trial or conviction in a court of law. Special courts would try people where there would be no provision for the right to appeal. This was an indirect contravention of the democratic principles and further aroused the anger of the masses, increasing the unrest in the country.